right, fantastic. We're recording now. And so we'll officially kick off and talk about kind of keys to building a tech stack for cloud accounting and bookkeeping practices like you all have. So let me jump over here and I'll share my screen. There we go. I always like to start any slide deck with our cat. So this is our kind of an Uncat mascot. So of course we call it a mascot. Uncat's famous. We heard so many accountants and bookkeepers say, I'm so tired of herding cats, chasing clients for information about uncategorized transactions. And so I thought that's a great motif for us. I should find an image of a person like herding a bunch of cats. And when I went looking for that type of imagery, I instead found a cat doing the herding. And I loved it. And so that became kind of our ironic, fun cat. All right, that's first screen. Second screen, this is what we're talking about today, tech stack. So here's a quick framework, and this is courtesy of Kelly Park. Some of you know Kelly. She publishes the cloud accounting templates, so a lot of useful templates. She also reviews a lot of applications on behalf of her community. And she shared not too long ago kind of a framework for evaluating tech. And so at a very high level, she talked about, does it solve a problem you have? That's pretty obvious, hopefully, but sometimes we lose track of the fact that if it doesn't solve a problem, right? It's not a painkiller. Do we actually need it? Or is it just going to take up more time? Does it improve a process that you already have? So maybe it's not an acute problem, like, oh, we just have nothing for this, but maybe you have a process that's just subpar. It's not optimal. Tech would help it to get smoother and better. This gets into a little more detail, but do the benefits outweigh the costs? And then she adds the distractions, right? Anytime you're implementing new technology, there's training, there's support, et cetera. And so are the benefits overwhelmingly better than not only just the list price of technology, but also the time investment, the adoption, rolling it out internally, getting clients to adopt it, et cetera? Is it gonna help net, pro versus con? Does it move you forward in your practice? Does it help you to grow? Does it help you to scale? Does it help you to make more money? And then this last one I really like, and it sort of goes to our cat mascot. Is it fun, right? I mean, not everything about work is fun all the time, but can you use technology that helps make things fun? Does it solve a problem, but at the same time, hopefully do it in a bit of a fun way? The way that I always start with tech, and courtesy to the co-founder of my last software company, my best friend from college, Ryan. And so we had a sales software company that we built together and sold several years ago. And he came at it from, kind of wearing his chief technology officer hat. And he said, look, to translate between users and developers, right, who are actually building the app and how it's going to work, it helps to write a story about it so that everyone's on the same page versus saying like, I really want it to do this and just build it. And then you can have gaps. And so our basic template for writing a user story was, as a blank, I want to blank. And so an example of that, I'll use Uncat, our app, as an example and kind of where we started from. What we said is, as an accounting professional, and my co-founder, Adam Slack, runs a big bookkeeping firm. So he'd say, as the owner of a bookkeeping firm, I want to get responses back from my clients about uncategorized transactions. That's the issue, that's the process, that's the problem I'm having and that I want to solve. Currently, so it's like, well, what do you do now? What's the story now? What are you trying to solve for? But currently, I export a report of uncategorized transactions from QuickBooks and I email it to my client. I usually have to remind my client to respond. When my client sends back the spreadsheet, I copy paste the responses into QuickBooks and I categorize them transaction. My client often sends receipts back to me as attachments in a whole bunch of separate emails. By the time the client responds, the report's out of date and there are more transactions. So I kind of have to repeat the process again. I repeat this process monthly. It's time consuming for me, and my client doesn't like it. They don't like receiving these emails of spreadsheets. It bothers them. So what do I want? I want my client to automatically get notified about uncategorized transactions on a weekly schedule. My clients shouldn't even have to log in. So it should be super simple for the client. Let's not hassle them. They should be able to simply click a link to respond. They should be able to enter a description for each transaction as well as upload receipts, and it should all sync into QuickBooks. And then I should be able to see their responses and categorize the transactions. And while I'm at it, assign classes, vendors, customers, and all of my selections should in turn sync into QuickBooks. And so that's what we built, right? Based on his user story, his description of, as an accountant, I want to be able to do this. And for my client, I want it to work like this for them. I don't want them to have to remember another password, set up a login, have to come into QuickBooks, because many of them don't go into QuickBooks anyway. They don't even have a QuickBooks login. So this is how, at a high level, it should work. And then it's a matter of translating that for us as app developers, translating it into code. For you all as owners of practices, it's a matter of then deciding on applications that match as much as possible that user story. And more often than not, you will find an app or a stack of apps, several apps that will solve any given user story. And occasionally, you will have a user story that doesn't have a solution yet, or not a good one, at which point, and we did a webinar on this last week or a couple weeks ago about sort of, hey, if you have an app idea, here are some of the steps and processes to go through if you want to build something, if you want to build an app from scratch. So there's sort of a nice feedback loop here as far as if you have a great user story and you're convinced it's important and nothing exists yet, it might be entrepreneurship time. Think about sharing it with somebody else, sharing it with an existing company or app developer that can do it, in which case all the more power to them, go. Or it could be something that you want to get involved in and start up. So we built Uncat to sync with QuickBooks and Xero, help accountants and bookkeepers fix and categorize transactions with their clients. And we have it match up with those user stories. So to back up a level, why technology to begin with? To communicate internally and with clients, and that's why we build Uncat. To schedule time and work, technology is useful for that. So here we're talking about workflow applications. We're talking about time tracking applications. So for example, we've done joint webinars with time tracking apps like Tink. We've done joint webinars with workflow apps like Arrow Workflow. That's sort of that category that we're talking about. To gather and vet information. Again, there's an aspect of Uncat that's gathering client responses back and allowing you to vet it so you can categorize transactions. So we're involved in that a little bit. And then there's other apps that also help with data gathering. To share documentation, receipts, workflow, processes, et cetera. To share things like that internally and with clients. Technology is useful for that. There's a bunch of apps that do that. This one's interesting, to create data location redundancy. So we're talking about backups here, right? Is there technology that can be helpful to you for backing up your QBO files, your QBD files, your Xero files to make sure that if something goes sideways in one location, you're protected, so you've got some redundancy. This one certainly is very popular to create and manage recurring project and out of scope work. So this kind of fits into this project management type software. Lots of titles out there that will do that, including Tink, including like internally for our development process, we'll use like a Trello board just to track what status is this given feature request that we're building for our customers. And then lastly, to get work done, like service delivery, actual accounting and bookkeeping. There's a huge tech stack for that. So for evaluating vendors, some questions to ask, because this was part of the webinar description and one of the things that I wanted to share, and certainly answer any questions that you all might have about it. Some questions that we get all the time as a vendor, and questions that we ask vendors that we work with. Why did they start? What are they in this for? What problems are they solving? What problems are they trying to solve in the future? They may have just gotten started, in which case, which direction are they going? What's the background of their founding team? Are the founders still involved? Is this a company that's been around for 30 years, in which case the founders may or may not still be involved? Is it brand new? In which case we're looking for a high level of founder involvement and kind of a direct line to the top to have influence on the product. Do they have good application security? That's super important, obviously, to all of us. Are they on any app stores? And that's related to security. So, when we passed the review to be on the QuickBooks App Store, that was a big deal. Big security review, technical review, marketing review, same for the Xero App Store. So if someone's on an app store, sort of understanding the process they went through to get on there can help you to vet their security and their seriousness. Where is data stored? Is data being stored? If so, where and how? Is it encrypted? Is it backed up, et cetera? In the case of Uncat, we run on Amazon Web Services, and data is synced into QuickBooks. So, that's one of the keys for us, is to say, where did the client description go? Where did this receipt go? It's on the transaction in QuickBooks. That's going to be your single source of truth. It's there. It's also in Uncat, so you can come into Uncat and look at it and say, oh yeah, there it is. At any time, you can also go into QuickBooks because it's a two-way sync. Authentication, we already talked about data storage, but authentication, how do we log in? Is it secure? Do I use my QuickBooks login? Do I create a login? Can I use a magic link as we use with Uncat? Those are all good questions to ask. Is it built with proprietary code? Did they write it from scratch? Do they own it? Is it written on open source? And there's some advantages and disadvantages to both. Most vendors probably use a combination of both. They've written their own code, but they're also built on top of a lot of open source software. Just kind of understanding that general stack that they use is helpful. Do they have any integrations? So for example, Uncat is integrated with QuickBooks and with Xero directly. And then indirectly, we kind of integrate with lots of other apps that are connected with QuickBooks and Xero. So for example, if you use an app that's gathering receipts, right, where you snap a photo and put it into QuickBooks, let's say, and it's in QuickBooks, then Uncat can also see it and show you that receipt in Uncat so that the client can give you a good description of why they made that purchase, right? So through QuickBooks, we can reasonably say that we have an integration with a Dext, an Expensify, a Shoebox, et cetera, because the things they're putting in to QuickBooks, we can show in Uncat and vice versa, which is pretty cool. There's also, and this is super popular, and if you were at QuickBooks Connect or any of the other recent conferences, there's a lot of apps that will help facilitate integrations. So you could use a Zapier or a Work in order to write something that says, every time I receive an email from this client, I want you to create a row in this spreadsheet, and I also want you to send them a link to this Dropbox folder. And so you can create those little workflows in those so that these three separate, disparate apps are all integrated. And lastly, is there an API? And that connects to this concept of integration, but is there a way to programmatically connect to the platform? So for example, QuickBooks has a robust, well-documented API, so does Xero. So it tells you, here's how you can query for certain transactions. Here's how we send you back the response to that query and how you can present it and what you can do with it. And so we obviously are heavy users of both of those APIs. A few more things to consider, and these some will seem pretty obvious, but that's why they're useful to keep in mind. Is the business sustainable? Right, anytime you want to contract for products or services, you kind of want to know, is this business going to stick around? Are they built to last? And two related questions there is, what is their user base? What's their customer base look like? And do they have sufficient funding, right? Is there enough to say, hey, next week, next month, next year, they're going to keep the lights on? And so those are very fair questions to ask any vendor. How long have they been in business? That's an evidence also of kind of staying power. In the case of Uncat, right? We started in 2019. We officially launched our production application on the QuickBooks App Store in 2020. So now we've been in the market for 3 years. We have thousands of accounting and bookkeeping firms using the app across thousands and thousands of clients. And so there's a lot of stress testing that happens over the course of that time to hopefully give you confidence to say, okay, this is a well-vetted platform that I can use and I can trust that it will be in business. If you're here in the States, if you're in a different country, what countries are supported, right? Do they support the currency here? Do they support how we do dates, the date formats? Is the app or software even available in a given country, especially regulated software, right? Do they have export controls? Is it available to me to use? And then sometimes it can be helpful to know, hey, what are the corporate values of this company? What's their mission and values look like? This is a company I want to do business with. Certainly pricing is important. Can I afford the application? Is it reasonable? Is the price commensurate with the overwhelming value that I'm going to get from using the technology? And then what do they use for marketing channels? What do they use for support? And that's a pretty popular question we get all the time, right? If I have a question, how do I get answers back from Uncat? And in our case, most questions funnel through to me, right? So you can email me directly, and I'll post my email in the chat. We have chat integrated through our website and in the app. So any user in the app at any time can say, oh, I see something. I have a question about how that works. And that will come to me. or our team, and we will answer back in chat or by email. And then if it's something that needs additional explanation, or we want to show how something works on a screen, then we'll set up a screen share like this. So we'll set up a Google Meet or a Zoom and kind of walk through things and do a demo. Okay, so here's my email address, brandon@uncat.com. That's the best way to reach me. I'll also be at Scaling New Heights coming up in June in St. Louis for any of you that are going to that conference. Obviously, QuickBooks Connect, when it comes back this fall, we'll be there. We'll be at a couple other conferences. This year, RootWorks in Denver, also coming up not too long from now. And then a couple other conferences, including Thrival Weekend in Greenville, South Carolina. So that's later in the fall. But a bunch of great shows. If any of you are traveling or belong to some of those kind of leadership and growth communities, then I look forward to meeting you in person, seeing you at those shows. But I'll go ahead and exit the deck and come back into the webinar and see if there are any questions already, or if you have any questions now that I can help answer. And I will circulate this slide deck to you all following the webinar. So if any of it's useful to you, or you just want to kind of keep a copy reserved, then please do. But I'm happy to help. One, because we get questions all the time as a vendor, and we try to answer them the best of our ability. We answer security reviews, we answer marketing and support questions, etc. And we also are using these frameworks to decide what applications we want to use internally. So like I say, we use Amazon Web Services, and we use Datadog for analyzing our software and making sure it's optimized to run for you all. And we use certain frameworks for our website and for our app and for our marketing, etc. So any questions at all that I can answer? Including anything, if you came to the webinar and you were like, I thought we were going to also talk about these types of questions, pop them in there, and I'm happy to talk through them. But hopefully this is a useful, A, high-level framework, and B, gives you kind of some specific questions that you can ask, right? How do I get support from your company? How much does the app cost? Can I see your security policy? Stuff like that is very fair. Most of the time you can just find answers on a vendor's website, but it's also nice sometimes to ask them directly and get their answer back. One thing I can show is, I can, obviously we're only 25 minutes in, so we can wrap relatively early. One thing I'll show you briefly is, yeah, you're welcome. Thanks. Thanks for being here, Tink. I knew you'd be here, and I'm glad you are, so thanks for joining. One thing I can show you very quickly, because I think a lot of you use Uncat or know about Uncat already, which is how you heard about the webinar. If you're not already using Uncat and you're sort of curious, like, well, he just kind of told me all about Uncat, but I haven't seen it and I haven't used it yet, I can show you that briefly. And so here is our homepage. This is uncat.com. So if you're interested in trying out Uncat, it's a free 2-week trial. You can test it with as many clients as you want. Super easy. Just click start a free trial. You'll create an Uncat account, connect to QuickBooks or Xero or both, whatever you use. Invite your first client. Client will get an email that says, hey, you're accounting professional. Your bookkeeper needs information back from you about a certain number of transactions worth a certain amount of money. Click here to go straight to your dashboard. And when they click that link, they'll see a dashboard that looks like this. And they'll be able to see the transactions and put in descriptions of what they are. And they can also add attachments of receipts and other information. And once they've done that, they just click Save Updates. And now their homework is done. The transactions will be removed from their dashboard. They don't see them anymore. Their answers will sync into QuickBooks. And their answers will also show up on your dashboard. And your dashboard will look like this. We're going to highlight the transactions that they've updated. So you can see the description. You can see any attachments they've added. And based on that, you can come in here and categorize the transaction. This is a chart of accounts for this particular client. You can assign a class. This is the vendor. So if the vendor was empty, you could choose a vendor. You can even create a new vendor from here in QuickBooks. You can see that it's a deposit. You can see it came from Venmo. So based on all that information, you can categorize. And then once you do and click Save, it will disappear from your dashboard and it will sync all of your changes into QuickBooks. And then you're done, right? So it's a super fast way to close the books, whether you do it weekly, monthly, quarterly, etc. It's a great way to get the answers back from your clients quickly without them having to have a QuickBooks login, without them needing to create an account for a new app. without them having to download anything. They just come in here. It's very familiar to them because they're probably responding in a spreadsheet format now. So they see this format, they enter in their information, you're able to update and save. You can expand the transaction because you can also assign tax. And in Canada, you'll see a drop down of the various tax rates you might be choosing from. You can choose a customer. You can choose from locations. So it gives you kind of all the options that you would generally do inside QuickBooks. You can do from here and just sync it in QuickBooks. You can select a transaction and then come up here and split it if you want. So you can split by category or by class. You can also select multiple transactions, and then this turns into a bulk menu so that you can assign the same class or the same location, same category to multiple transactions at a time. You can search for transactions. So if I just want to take care of the Amazon transactions first, I can look at those. As you can imagine, we see lots of expenses from Amazon, Walmart, Costco, Home Depot, Lowe's, big box stores where you can buy almost anything. Those are pretty popular. But of course, it all depends on your client. So you might have uncategorized transactions from other sources. On the income side, we see lots of deposits from Venmo, PayPal, Square, Stripe, Cash App, and of course, good old-fashioned cash, where you just need some additional information back from the client in order to categorize. So you can see here, you can see multiple clients all on one screen, so you don't have to have hundreds of tabs open in QuickBooks trying to close the books across all your clients. They'll all show up here in Uncat. It's easy to jump to a particular client. So that's kind of a quick tour of the dashboard. From a settings perspective, here you can see a list of the clients that you've got connected to Uncat. You can invite as many of your coworkers as you want. You can assign them to particular clients. If you only want them to see certain clients, you can do that here. You can customize the app so that it shows your logo and it shows your name at the top, and you can change the color of the app so that it aligns with your brand colors. Pricing is super easy. So billing settings is just $5 a month per client that you add to Uncat. So it's a very inexpensive application. And then from a client settings perspective, every client, you can customize Uncat for them. So you can choose which accounts you want to sync into Uncat. You can choose how far back you want to sync. So a lot of people use Uncat for cleanups. Super useful for that. You can change when the client gets notified. We recommend weekly. That works the best because if you do monthly, sometimes the client will forget what they spent money on. Weekly is great. That's when they'll receive an email notification. And optionally, if you put their text number in, their phone number into Uncat, they'll receive a text message notification also. And you should click the link on the text message. It'll open up Uncat in Safari on their iPhone or Chrome in their Android, and they can just tap in their answers, upload receipts from their camera roll on their phone, and send it in. So hugely popular among clients that like to use their phones to answer these queries. And these are the dashboard settings. So the default is the description is required and the receipt is optional for the client. But if you hit this little superpower switch at the top, you can control exactly which fields are visible to client, which ones can they update, and which ones are required. So now that I've clicked that for this client, I'm now requiring not only the description, but also a class. And I'm actually requiring that the client categorize their own transactions. I'll be able to review them. And if they make a mistake, so I can override their selections. But otherwise, we're allowing the client in this instance to categorize their own transactions. Totally up to you. I'll switch it back to the default, which is just a description, which is what you saw earlier in the demo. And this is a list of the client users for this client. So you can have as many users as you want, invite them. You can assign them to particular payment accounts, like just their credit card, and or certain uncategorized accounts, like just deposits, just expenses, etc. So it gives you a lot of control over who sees what in Uncat. Uncat, the billing, like I say, is just $5 a month per client. Unlimited transactions, unlimited colleagues, unlimited client users. So it's a very flexible platform. All right, so since I used Uncat as an example, if some of you are wondering what is Uncat, what are we talking about here? That's what the app looks like, super user-friendly, and goes without saying, would love nothing more if it can be useful to you and save you time according to the framework we set out before. If it saves you time, if it solves a problem for you, if it's fun, we try to make it fun with all the cat logos and stuff, then please let me know. Happy to show you a one-on-one demo, but even easier is to just start a trial because it's a very straightforward application. Clients kind of pick it up and use it right away, and it should be super easy for you and save you a lot of time. All right, let me jump back here. And I will stop presenting for now. See if there's any additional questions. I'm happy to answer them. And then otherwise, I will post the recording of this webinar. I'll also post the slides. And I'll send out an email to everybody so you have those. And otherwise, let me know if I can answer any questions for anybody. All right. I think we may be all set. Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate it. If any of you like to bicycle, hopefully I'll see you out on the trails sometime this summer. Otherwise, hopefully I'll meet you all in person at one of the big conferences. All right. Thanks, Sharon. Really appreciate it. You all have a wonderful Wednesday. Thanks, Lori. All right. Take care, everybody.